Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Stormy Monks, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Grand Rounds presentation, hosted by the Southwest Center for Pediatric Environmental Health. The Southwest Center for Pediatric Environmental Health is one of 10 pediatric environmental health specialty units, also known as PACUs, in the United States. The purpose of the PACU program is to serve as a leading national source of medical information and consultative advice on environmental conditions that influence human health. To serve part of our mission, we offer this Grand Round series once a month on the third Thursday of each month. October is a special month for us. It is Children's Health Month, and the National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week is October 20th through the 26th. And so for that reason, we have Piper Fisher with us today to speak on lead. Before we move forward, I want to make sure that you all are aware of some housekeeping items. During the event, you will not be able to share your video and you will be muted by default. You cannot unmute yourself, but we ask that you use the chat box on the side, and we will ensure that Piper gets all of your comments and questions. We want to acknowledge our funders and our partners. And so we want to thank the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry and the Public Health Institute. Without these organizations, the work of the PACU would not exist. If you are wanting to seek CME or CNE credits, we have these QR codes for you. We're going to provide the information on accessing your CME, CNE in the chat, but here you guys can use the QR code. We also have your activity check-in here and a QR code. But again, don't worry if you don't have enough time to get on those. So we will make sure that you get those during the course of the presentation. We want to make you aware of our next Grand Rounds occurring on Thursday, November 21st at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. We will discuss the impact of fossil fuels on maternal and child health, and Dr. Uwak will be with us that day. We want to make you aware, we always offer trainings, let me say that. We offer all types of trainings, but two trainings that we have been focusing on is pesticide use and its effects on migrant farm workers and their families, as well as childhood cancer and environmental exposures. We encourage you, whether you are a community member, a promotora, a community health worker, someone in public health, nurse, physician, these we hope that you take advantage of these trainings. And if you're interested in them, we'll go ahead and put our emails in the chat, and you can email any one of us to get information on when we will be offering those. So without further ado, I want to introduce Piper Fisher. She is an environmental scientist with more than 3 years of experience working in local and federal government to improve public environmental health, with a focus on environmental justice and collaborating with community partners. She will be speaking on understanding lead. And again, we're very fortunate to have her here, and we want to offer her a warm welcome. Thank you, Piper.
Me. Like she said, my name is Piper Fisher, and I work at EPA Region 6 in our lead-based paint program, and I'm going to be the speaker this morning. I'd like to start off by thanking the PACU for inviting us to be here today for this Grand Rounds presentation, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us to learn more about lead, its impacts, and how to reduce and prevent lead exposure. All right, so you may have heard about lead or lead poisoning before today, but you may not know very much about it. So my goal for you today is that you can walk away with an understanding of what lead is and where it's found, how lead can harm children, adults, and wildlife, and how you can take action to reduce and prevent exposure to lead. So I'd like to acknowledge that some of the information we're covering today about lead may seem alarming, but lead exposure is preventable. So with that in mind, I wanted to start off by introducing this Actions to Reduce Potential Lead Exposure infographic. And this emphasizes that there are many simple actions we can take to reduce lead exposure. We're going to be going over the 8 actions in this infographic in more detail in the second part of today's session. And I will also make sure that you have a link to these actions to reduce lead exposure in chat at the end. So to start off with, I wanted to talk about what lead is. Lead is a naturally occurring bluish-gray metal that is found in small amounts in the Earth's crust. And while lead does have some beneficial uses, it can be toxic to humans and animals and cause lifelong health impacts. Once lead has been used in a product, it is nearly impossible to identify with the naked eye. So you will not be able to pick up an object and tell whether or not it contains lead just by looking at it. Lead does not biodegrade or disappear from the environment over time. And Congress has passed laws that limit the amount of lead that can be present in products, outdoor air, emissions from industrial sources, and wastewaters, and more. So this will be the first bit of our presentation that is a little bit interactive because I do want to hear from you in the chat. Where do you think lead can be found? And take a moment to glance around the room that you're in or think about your everyday activities. You might think of pencils, but they are made with graphite and not lead. So feel free to put anything in chat. I've got chat up so I can see. Kate has said paint, soil, and windowsills. Those are all definitely places that lead can be found. Paint again. Spices, toy jewelry. Pottery, stained glass, ammunition, bean pots. Candy wrappings, yes, that is one. Food, makeup. Yeah, plumbing, computer cords, batteries. Yeah, you guys already know. Soil, yes. Water, candy. Yeah, you can take a look in chat and see that lead is in basically everything. There's a wide range of things. Electronics, Mexican candy, yes. All stuff that has been found to contain lead. So I'm going to start us off by speaking briefly about lead-based paint. This is a big one that people know, and lead-based paint is primarily found in older homes that were built before 1978. And this is because in 1978, that's when Congress outlawed the use of lead-based paint in residential homes or childcare facilities. So historically, lead compounds were added to paints in order to enhance color, reduce corrosion, or shorten the drying time. And so because of those attractive traits, lead was pretty commonly added to paint. However, if lead-based paint is present in older homes that were built before 1978, it can be a major source of exposure to people who live there. If painted surfaces are not properly maintained, paint can deteriorate, peel, chip, chalk, or crack. Lead-based paint is also a risk on surfaces that are subject to a lot of friction, such as on doors and windowsills. That can cause it to deteriorate quickly as well. And so when these painted surfaces deteriorate, it can form lead-based paint chips as well as lead dust. And so those hazards can then be breathed in or swallowed by children, residents, or people who work in the building. Any renovation, repair, or painting project that is done in a pre-1978 home that disturbs those painted surfaces can also create the lead dust, and that can harm children and adults. Because lead-based paint was outlawed in 1978, many buildings and homes have since been repainted with new paint. And so if a painted surface is in good condition, if lead-based paint is in good condition, it is usually not a hazard. But if it's on an impact or friction surface like a window, that can cause the paint to deteriorate. And if you notice that the painted surface has started to deteriorate, or there is any renovation projects happening that is disturbing that paint, it can become a risk it is definitely a risk then. So this slide has a couple other potential sources of exposure on here. Lead and lead compounds have been used in a variety of products. And this can include paint that was used on farm equipment and boats. Lead-based paint has also been is used in some industrial contexts as well. Lead-based paint can be found in imported pottery. It has also been found to be in some types of older mini blinds, older candles even. Lead can be found in toys, ceramic ware, solder, such as used for stained glass, batteries, ammunition, fishing tackle, old cell phones in disrepair, and some cosmetics, for example, lipstick, but also some types of traditional cosmetics that people use. So as for toys, on this slide, there's a photo of a toy that was recalled. So it's a good idea to stay up to date on recalls from the Consumer Product Safety Commission website, because unfortunately we do see that certain toys or products aimed at children get recalled due to lead contamination. And you can also see an example on this slide of some imported pottery from Mexico. Lead can also enter the drinking water, and this can happen when plumbing materials that contain lead corrode. The most common sources of lead in drinking water are found from lead pipes, faucets, and fixtures. And these are more likely to be found in older cities and homes that were built before 1986. Unfortunately, lead can also enter the soil, and this is one way that children can ingest the soil, either from normal hand-to-mouth activity, playing, or even from eating vegetables that may have taken up lead from the soil that they were grown in. And lead can also be ingested by animals if they eat plants that were grown in lead-contaminated soil. Lead in soil can also be inhaled if it has been resuspended into the air or tracked into a house on the bottom of our shoes. And so on this slide, we have an example of some raised garden beds, because building raised beds and growing plants in containers is the most common way that people can reduce their chances of coming into contact with contaminants in urban gardens. These gardening techniques are preferred because there's clean soil and organic matter that has been used to build the raised beds, and that can create a physical barrier between the person who is doing the gardening and the plants that are being grown from potential contamination in the ground soil. There can also be a greater risk of lead exposure from using products that have been imported from other countries. And this is because some countries do not have laws in place to regulate the use of lead. And so some of the products that have been found to contain lead, especially when imported, include spices. This is one that you may have been seeing a lot on the news recently. There have been some FDA recalls of cinnamon that was found to contain spices. And so unfortunately, that is also a source of lead exposure sometimes. Certain traditional or folk remedies have been found to contain lead. And so these include remedies that are possibly given for arthritis, infertility, upset stomach, menstrual cramps, colic, and other illnesses. Sometimes imported medicine and things like that from other countries may contain lead. Some forms of traditional pottery in other countries can also contain lead in the glazes or decorations on the surface. And so if these clay pieces in the pottery have not been manufactured properly, that lead glaze can leach into the food or drink that is prepared, stored, or served in these dishes. So if you have some imported pottery, a lot of it is quite beautiful. I would tend to use them for decoration if you are not sure about the manufacturing process or whether or not lead glaze was used. Ammunition and fishing tackle used for hunting and fishing can also contain lead. And so humans can be at risk of lead exposure if they have accidentally consumed spent ammunition in game meat. Wildlife is also at risk of lead exposure from spent ammunition, and this could be from wounded prey or the ingestion of animal parts. Wildlife can also be at risk from ingesting lead fishing tackle. And so the best way to avoid this risk of exposure is to use lead-free ammunition and lead-free fishing tackle. So let's take a moment to review what are some of the sources of lead exposure that we went over. Did I teach you any new ones? I saw in chat earlier, you guys already knew quite a lot. Well, if you guys are ready, then I can go ahead. The specific home, okay, just says the specific home remedies where lead may be found. Yeah, I can try to give a list of some of the ones. I believe there is one called Azarcon or something. But I will definitely try to get a list of that. Yeah, it can also vary depending on which community it originates from, the name. So I'm going to move on right now to talking about vulnerable populations. All humans can potentially be exposed to lead. However, certain groups are more vulnerable than others, and this includes children under the age of 6, adults who may be exposed through their jobs, hobbies, or cultural practices, and pregnant and nursing people. So the first and most vulnerable population is children under the age of 6. And lead is especially dangerous to children under the age of 6 because their growing bodies absorb more lead than adults. And because children's brains and nervous systems are still developing, that makes them more sensitive to lead's damaging effects. So today, one of the most common ways that children are exposed through lead is through contact with lead-based paint chips and dust. Babies and young children can also have higher exposure because they often put hands or other objects in their mouth. And we all know children put a lot of things in their mouth. For example, they may have dropped their pacifier on the floor. And if the floor was covered with lead dust, if they then put that pacifier back in their mouth, that is one way that they can become exposed to lead. Children may also eat paint chips that they find or dirt that contains lead. Lead-based paint also, unfortunately, has a sweet taste, which can make it even more appealing to young children. So they may lick or bite on chewable lead-based paint surfaces. And as you can see in this photo, there's a child that is chewing on something. Children can also be exposed to lead by eating contaminated food or drinking water that has been contaminated with lead. And this includes drinking powdered formula that was made with lead-contaminated water. Food and liquids stored or served in lead crystal or lead-glazed pottery can become contaminated because lead can leach from those containers into the food or liquid. Children can also be exposed to lead in their toys, and it's most common for lead to be present in older toys or imported toys, and that can become a problem if the child is biting on the toy, chewing it, or even swallowing it. Working in certain jobs may also increase an adult's potential exposure to lead, and this includes renovation or repair of older homes and buildings, painting, construction, refinishing furniture, smelting, mining, auto repair, and working at hazardous waste sites. Adults may also engage in hobbies that put them at risk of lead exposure, and this could include making stained glass because lead can be contained in the solder, making ammunition or fishing weights or fishing tackle can put them at risk of lead exposure. Shooting at a gun range or using those certain folk remedies can also put them at risk. And I want to thank Scott. He linked a page on Azarcon, which is one of those remedies that I was mentioning. And so these activities can cause lead dust or soil to get on your hair, skin, or your clothing. And then that dust can then be transferred to the interior of your car or home. And then you can take that lead exposure back home and expose the rest of the family. There is no known safe level of exposure to lead. So even small amounts of lead in children can result in behavior and learning problems, lower IQ and hyperactivity, slowed growth, hearing problems, and anemia. In rare cases, high amounts of lead can have devastating effects, including seizures, coma, or even death. Adults who have been exposed to lead can suffer from nerve disorders, increased blood pressure, decreased kidney function, reproductive problems, as well as memory and concentration problems. A pregnant person who is exposed to lead is also of concern because it can result in exposure not only to them, but also to the developing fetus. And while this is most common in 1 to 2-year-old children, some pregnant people can also be exposed to lead from the intentional ingestion or mouthing of soil, clay, or pottery, which is a behavior known as pica. So for the health effects with pregnant people, lead can accumulate in our bodies over time, and it will become stored in our bones. So during pregnancy, lead is released from the mother's bones along with calcium, and that can expose the fetus or breastfeeding infant to lead. This occurs especially when the parent does not receive adequate dietary calcium, and it can result in serious effects, including causing the baby to be born too early or too small, putting the mother at risk for miscarriage, hurting the baby's brains, kidney, or nervous systems, and increasing the likelihood of learning or behavioral problems. So I also want to talk briefly about the health effects that lead exposure has on wildlife, because just like humans, the ingestion of lead in wildlife can also impact them negatively. Lead in the food web can impact birds, mammals, amphibians, and animals also suffer the negative consequences of lead exposure. Lead exposure can impact their coordination. For example, birds may not be able to fly anymore if they have severe lead poisoning. And that can impact an animal's ability to hunt or eat, as well as their general health. Lead poisoning can also, unfortunately, lead to the death of wildlife as well. Animals can be exposed to lead from mining, facility emissions, and lead-based paint. However, research indicates that ingesting lead fishing tackle and spent lead ammunition are 2 of the major sources of lead exposure and lead poisoning in wildlife. So for an example of how that can magnify through the food chain, a fish may swallow some lead fishing weights that were on the bottom of the pond. And then, for example, a bird like this eagle on the slide could then catch the fish, eat it, and become exposed to lead that way. So for the second half of the presentation, I really want to focus on taking action to prevent lead exposure. The good news about lead is that lead exposure is preventable. And so we're going to continue the discussion by talking about some of these actions that people can take at home in order to reduce their family's potential exposure to lead. So the first one of our actions is keeping homes clean and dust-free. So we recommend wet mopping floors and hard surfaces such as porches in order to minimize lead dust. And so the reason wet mopping is used is because it will prevent dust from getting kicked up in the air, like if you're sweeping something. Wiping down hard surfaces such as countertops, windowsills, and door jambs with a wet cloth will also help get rid of lead dust that may have settled on those surfaces. It's very important to inspect and maintain all painted surfaces in order to guard against deterioration. It's like I said earlier, if lead-based paint is in good condition, it is smooth, it is not deteriorating, or it's been painted over with paint that is in good condition, then it's not a risk. However, we want to be always inspecting and making sure that there is no deterioration happening. So if you notice that there is any peeling, chipping, chalking, or cracking paint, wet wipe the area immediately. Do not pick or scrape at the area, and remove a child's access to the area. One of the stories that I like is that I heard a story of a parent who had chipping paint on their windowsill. And so what she did is she wet wiped the area, and then she went and found some contact paper and put that over the deteriorating paint. And so that was a very easy and low cost way to make sure that her child was not going to go over there and start picking at the paint. Another one of our actions to reduce lead exposure is eating a diet high in iron, calcium, and vitamin C. So ensure that your family members eat a well-balanced diet of fruits, vegetables, grains, dairy, and protein foods. Foods that are higher in calcium, iron, and vitamin C can help reduce the absorption of lead. Children who have healthy diets also may absorb less lead. It's important to wash all food thoroughly with safe water sources prior to eating, and this can help remove soil or lead dust that may have adhered to the surface of the food. It is also important to not eat food or drink water that was cooked or stored in chipped or cracked lead crystal, lead glazed pottery, or lead porcelain cookware. This one is a very easy one, but it's also very important. Washing children's hands is a way to help reduce their exposure to lead, especially lead dust or lead in soil that may have settled on their hands. So use soap or water. It can be warm water or cold water. It's just the action of using soap and water that is important here. To wash children's hands several times a day, especially after they've been playing outside or with animals. Adults should also wash their hands after participating in activities where they may have come into contact with lead. It's important to guide children to play in grassy or non-contaminated soil areas, especially if the child's play areas are near roadways, junkyards, older buildings, or uncontrolled sites or properties. And this is, again, to reduce their potential chances of coming into contact with lead in soil. In the same vein, using designated picnic, camping, and hiking areas is important. And children should be taught to wipe and remove their shoes and to wash their hands after playing outdoors. You can also wipe off pets' paws prior to bringing them indoors and place dust mats both inside and outside your home. And so the actions on this slide, like I said, are aimed at reducing the exposure to lead in soil, as well as making sure that lead in soil does not get tracked into the home. It is very important to hire a certified lead professional when doing work on a home that was built before 1978. Renovation projects can be fun and rewarding. If you live in an older home, it can also be very necessary to do certain renovation projects or various repairs. However, any renovation, repair, or painting project that is done in a pre-1978 home can easily cause dangerous lead dust. And so lead dust can be created if these surfaces have been disturbed or demolished during a project, and that increases the risk of lead exposure. Because of this risk, EPA recommends that owners of pre-1978 homes hire a lead-safe certified contractor. A lead-safe certified contractor is trained in work practices that will be lead-safe for home renovations. If, however, you prefer to do your own renovations, EPA also has a page with do-it-yourself lead-safe work practices, and so we recommend that you take those precautions as well. And so you can find those precautions at our page, epa.gov/lead/RRP-DIYers. And I will also, at the end of my presentation, I will send you all of these links in chat to make sure that you have them. You can also hire a lead certified professional you can find one at our page, epa.gov/lead/find-a-contractor. And you can use that tool to look up people who are certified in your area. If you live in the state of Oklahoma, There is also an Oklahoma specific directory, and I will link that in chat as well to make sure that you have it. Shower and changing is another one of the actions to reduce lead exposure. And this one is primarily aimed at adults who may work in jobs or hobbies that expose them to lead. So you should clean or remove work clothes and shoes before entering the home to avoid tracking in lead from soil, work sites, or hobbies. Work clothes and shoes should be stored in a designated area outside of the home. Work clothes should also be washed separately from other family members' clothes to avoid contaminating them. It's also important for adults to shower after activities in which they may have been exposed to lead. Another very simple action is making sure that toys, pacifiers, and bottles have been regularly washed. So children's pacifiers, bottles, toys, stuffed animals, washing them frequently will also help reduce the potential of lead dust being present on the surfaces. It's important to make sure that children are not chewing on painted toys, windowsills, or other painted surfaces. There are also several actions that you can take to reduce exposure from lead in water. And so one of the ways that you can do this is by flushing your home's tap by running the water. And you do not just have to let the tap run, you can also flush the pipes by taking a shower, doing laundry, or doing a load of dishes. The amount of time that you should let the water run will depend on whether or not you have a lead service line, as well as the length of the lead service line. So you can contact your local water utility and find out the recommendations for flushing times that they have in your community. But I will say in general, I have seen them mostly range between letting it run for 30 seconds to 2 minutes. But if your community has a specific recommendation, you can contact the water utility to get that. It's important to use only cold water for drinking, cooking, and making baby formula. Boiling water does not remove lead from the water. And so you also want to use cold water because warm water, hot water may cause more lead to be released in the pipes. You can also install a filter certified to remove lead. I've seen ones that screw onto the tap itself. The important thing is to just check the certification on the filter to make sure that it can actually remove lead. Because I have seen ones that cannot. So you want to make sure that you have one that's certified. You should also clean your faucet screen, otherwise known as the aerator, regularly. Sediment, debris, and lead particles can collect in the aerator, and if lead particles are caught in the screen, that can cause lead to get into the water. So if you are not sure whether or not you have a lead service line, I recommend contacting your water utility or a licensed plumber. They can help you make that determination. EPA also has a website at epa.gov/protectyourtap. That will also help you determine if you have a lead service line. And you can always contact your water utility and have your water tested to learn more about lead levels in your drinking water. I've heard of some municipalities doing it for free. That may not be the case in all areas, but you can contact and see what your options are. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about getting your child tested for lead. The only way to know if a child has lead in their blood is to have a blood test. And so this is another time I'm going to ask you to put in chat, do you know if your children have had a blood test, or your grandchildren, or any of the children in your family? Do you know? Jess says, yes, her children have been tested at 1 and 2. Yes, exactly. So like I said, the only way to know is to have a blood test. And lead exposure often occurs with no obvious symptoms, which means that it can go unrecognized. However, there is no amount of lead that is safe for children. It's generally recommended that children should be tested at ages 1 and 2. And for children on Medicaid, they are required to be tested at ages 1 and 2. And Lori says in chat that she works for Head Start and they have equipment to test our students for lead. Yes, it's very important to get children tested. And somebody else says that sometimes doctors don't want to test for some reason. Yes, we've also heard of that happening. And what we generally tell people is to just be firm and ask for it. Sometimes people will try to say that, oh, you're not at risk. But as we've seen, even if you don't live in an older home, you live in a newer one, there are still many other sources of lead exposure, and it's important to have that information. I also wanted to highlight in 2021, the CDC updated the blood lead reference value from 5 micrograms per deciliter to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. The blood lead reference value is the level at which a child has more lead in their blood than do most US children, which is 97.5% of children ages 1 to 5. And so this is used as a guide to determine appropriate follow-up actions and to prevent further exposure. So if your child tests higher than 3 micrograms per deciliter, your doctor will hopefully discuss further follow-up actions and further testing. Yeah, I see in chat that sometimes doctors only look at older housing, so they won't test, but there are so many other sources. Yes, and I've also heard cases of children where their parents lived in a newer home, but they also spent a significant amount of time at their grandparents' house, which was an older home. So there's a lot of different options, but the only way to know for sure is to have that blood test. Daycare too, yes, exactly. So out of all of the actions that we talked about today, which of these do you think might be the easiest to take, or which do you think that you might start using? My favorite thing about these actions to reduce lead exposure is that a lot of them are very easy for people to incorporate in their daily routine, and most of them are free or low cost. And you can use whichever one you find easiest and start it right away. So people in chat are saying running water, flushing their taps, the water filter, wet mopping, wet dusting. Yeah, those are all very good options. Washing shoes, testing soil in yards, wet mopping. Thank you for sharing. Using raised beds if wanting to do a garden. Yes, that's a good one. And so I will make sure that you guys have a link to the EPA website that has these actions to reduce lead exposure so that you don't forget it. So before we end, I wanted to share some important information about the rights of home buyers and renters to know if lead is present before signing a lease or contract. Federal law requires that anyone selling or renting a pre-1978 housing provides specific information about lead-based paint, or if lead-based paint hazards are present before the contract or lease is signed. This is not required if it is housing for the elderly or persons with disabilities. However, if children under the age of 6 are present in the house, then it does apply. It also does not apply to 0-bedroom dwellings or if the painted surfaces in the home have already been declared to be lead-free. So before signing a contract or a lease for a pre-1978 home, federal law requires that buyers and renters receive all of the following. So the first thing that they should receive is a copy of EPA's Protect Your Family in Your Home pamphlet, which is available in multiple languages, and I've also included a picture of it on the slide here. Buyers and renters should also receive any known information about the presence of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the home. And for multi-unit buildings, such as apartment complexes, This includes a report and records for the common area and other units in a building-wide evaluation. Buyers and renters also must receive a disclosure of information that is either attached to or included in the contract or lease. And that includes a lead warning statement and confirms the seller or landlord has complied with all of the notification requirements. Buyers also have 10 days to conduct a lead-based paint inspection or risk assessment. If you are not provided with this information, ask for it. You can also submit a complaint to EPA by calling the National Lead Information Center at 1-800-424-5323. And so you can submit a complaint at that number and let them know that you did not receive the notification that you were supposed to. So today we discussed the sources of lead exposure, how lead harms children and adults, the impacts on wildlife, as well as actions that we can take to prevent potential lead exposure. So today was just meant to be an introduction to lead. We went over it pretty quickly. I want to know, do you have any questions about the information that we covered today? And feel free to put that in chat. I will also go ahead and put some of my links in chat. Let's see, Jess says, are we familiar with the testing product to detect lead? So EPA currently has two authorized lead testing kits, and these are authorized for use by lead inspectors or risk assessors. So I believe that the kit that you have linked, that is not one of the ones that is certified by EPA, because some testing kits, there are a lot available on Amazon or other websites, and they have not necessarily been through the testing protocols that EPA uses to determine whether or not, they're going to show a false positive or a false negative. So what EPA recommends is you can hire a lead risk inspector, a lead inspector, or a lead risk assessor. And so those are professionals who are trained in how to administer a test for lead. And so a lead risk inspector can tell you where lead is located in your home and test the paint. A risk assessor can tell you where lead is located, as well as work with you on various ways to mitigate that or ideas going forward. And so we recommend that because they are certified professionals who will make sure that they're not getting a false negative or a false positive. And they will also be using test kits that have been certified by the EPA. So let's see. What is the standard maximum contaminant level for lead in food and cosmetics? That is a good question. I can get back to you on that. The FDA regulates the levels of lead in food and cosmetics. And so that would be something that you can find from the FDA, but I can also look that up for you as well. It will probably depend on what type of product you're looking at. After taking steps to decrease lead levels, when is retesting recommended? So that would be something to speak with a medical provider about. I would not be able to give you that information, but hopefully your medical provider or your doctor will have an idea of the testing schedule that your child should undergo. Are there resources, i.e. grants or nonprofits, in terms of testing for lead for homeowners who are low poverty and may live in these older homes? So I am not Specifically, I don't know about grants that are available for like lead inspections or risk assessments. However, I know that HUD has a lead hazard control grant program. And so one thing that you can do is you can look up and see if you live in an area that is a recipient of a lead hazard control grant. And so I know under those grant programs, they have free lead abatement or lead mitigation strategies available. But you would have to live in an area that had received one of those lead hazard control grants. But you can also contact the state and see if they know about anything. A lot of our states are authorized for the abatement program, so they are the ones who are certifying inspectors and risk assessors. And I can also give you a list of the state websites as well. And Scott has shared the link for the EPA approved testing kits. Yes. So for the state of Texas, that would, or not the state of Texas, for our region, that would be the D-lead kit as well as the 3M lead check kit, which has been discontinued, but I hope will be back on the market soon. Yeah, Robin says check with your local health department. Some have the HUD grant. Yes, I agree with that. So I'm going to put, I shared in chat some links. This is our website, epa.gov/lead, as well as our Spanish website, espanol.epa.gov/plomo. I've also included the link to the Actions to Reduce Lead Exposure website, the EPA Protect Your Tap website, and I also wanted to share the National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week website. National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week is next week. And so EPA headquarters has several more free webinars that are available. You can also see a version of the presentation I just gave you will be being given next week by headquarters. But there is also further information next week about the renovation, repair, and painting law, as well as the real estate disclosure law that I just went over with you. And then I've linked the locator for finding an RRP certified contractor in your area, as well as the one for the state of Oklahoma, and also the page for lead safe work practices for DIYers. All right. So I'm going to go to the next slide. If you have any questions after the session today, or you want more information on lead, you can contact the National Lead Information Center and use this toll-free number. The National Lead Information Center provides public as well as professionals with information about lead hazards, and lead exposure prevention. You can also call this number to file a complaint about your landlord or about a contractor if they are not following federal laws about lead. You can speak with a specialist Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. through 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And they also have a relay service for hearing or speech challenged individuals. I additionally want to highlight, we have a Region 6 specific lead hotline, and this can be found at 214-665-7577. So you can call us at that number and it will be forwarded to one of our lead team members' phones. And so we can answer you and answer your question about that. Or if you do not get any of us available, you can leave a message and one of us will call you back as soon as possible. So thank you so much for participating in today's session. I wanted to share my contact with you. Like I said, my name is Piper Fisher. You can contact me at my email here. And I've also included the contact information for some of my colleagues, including Mike Adams, who is our regional lead coordinator, and Chelsea Perry. Our children's health coordinator is Jenny Vietti, and you can contact her for information about children's health. And I've also included our websites, epa.gov/lead and the Spanish website. And so with that, I wanted to say thank you for participating in today's session. If there's any more questions, I can still answer those as well. Oh, and I think let's see. Yeah, earlier Dawn said The Oklahoma State Department of Health Lead Division will have a lead follow-up schedule when the child has an elevated lead level, and that CPC should also have that information. So yeah.
Thank you again for presenting. It looks like most of the questions you were able to pull out of the chat without us having to do much for you there. But if there are any other questions, please feel free to type them in, or if you have a longer question that needs to be spoken, you can type that in and I can try to move you into a position to speak.
I just wanted to thank you, Piper, for being here and for speaking at many of our conferences and our meetings on this on lead. And I do encourage anyone to reach out to all of the people here on this list. They're very helpful and can hopefully get you more information if you have any additional questions. We've also put our email in the chat earlier, but I will put it in again. And if you all have any additional questions that you would like the PACEU to respond to, or if you're interested in any additional trainings that we provide, please feel free to email us at that address. So again, thank you, Piper, for being with us.